Hello and welcome to this special show on HDFC Bank and its changes in the position of chairman of the board of this large bank. Atanu Chakraborty resigned from the board serving as non-executive chairman, and the bank has appointed HDFC's old hand, Keki Mistry, as the interim chairman of the board. In his resignation letter, Atanu, a former bureaucrat, said that bank's practices did not align with his values and ethics, which seemed to cast a shadow on the bank's workings, which was speedily rebutted by Keki Mistry, who lent his support to the management of the bank, aiming for stability of this systemically important bank. Now, the bank regulator, Reserve Bank of India, has also been quick in allaying any fears on the change and stated that there are no governance concerns surrounding HDFC Bank and that the RBI has approved the changes in the chairman of the board. So as a way forward, we learn from sources that with the conflict between Atanu Chakraborty and the bank's leadership now being resolved with this particular change in chairmanship of the board, Shashidhar Jagdishan's position at the helm of HDFC Bank strengthens further. That's what the bank insiders tell us. Now remember that his reappointment for the next term as the CEO of HDFC Bank is due in October this year, to be watched very, very closely and has not yet been applied as we speak, is what we gather. Now, let me discuss this with some experts joining in to make sense of this large corporate development. Let me welcome on the show Ashutosh Mishra, who's the head of research, institutional equity at Ashika Stock Broking. And we also have with us Amit Tandon, who's the founder and MD at IIAS. Gentlemen, so good to have you on NDTV Profit. And to put context first, before we take it to the expert comments coming in, let's hear out HDFC Bank's leaders' thoughts on a con call in this particular change, Shashidhar, and how he allayed fears and the changes that have really come in.
Minor issues do come up from time to time, but there was nothing material whatsoever. Let me reassure you, in no board meeting has there been any kind of, complete differences of opinion or anything of that sort. And the board minutes will reflect that. Relationship, human beings are human beings. There will always be some relationship issue between individuals. Those kind of things happen. There was no power struggle in the bank, as you put it, Suresh. The bank works, the entire bank, the management team in the bank works as a cohesive unit, and to my mind will continue to work as a cohesive unit. I would not have taken on this responsibility at the age of 71 if it did not align with my principles and the level of integrity that I would expect from the bank. None of us as board members are aware of what are the specific issues which Mr. Chakraborty wrote in his letter. The board members asked him yesterday, and he didn't give any specific explanation.
We will not do anything that will bring in ignominy. Of course, there will be a large organization, will have errors and omissions. We will continue to address them as we go along, but never will the tone of the top have anything which will have any kind of embarrassment to anyone, including our own conscience.
All right, so those were the snippets of all the developments that have really taken place since morning today on this large development at HDFC Bank. We have with us Ashutosh Mishra as well as Amit Tandon joining in. Amit Tandon, first question to you. What does this entire, turn of events and how it was really resolved by the bank very speedily and quickly, what does it show about this overall governance aspect of a systemically important bank?
Thanks a lot for inviting me, Nisha. I'll first begin with a disclosure that HDFC Bank owns 10% equity in IIAS. So your viewers need to take whatever I say with taking that into account. Having said so, I guess what it means is that they know more about what is happening in our company rather than us necessarily knowing regarding what is happening at at the bank, and certainly not with regard to the developments which have taken place this morning. I think, given the letter, there's simply no clarity in terms of what the underlying issues are. The chairman did, or the ex-chairman did say that there wasn't any alignment in the ethics, and there was certainly a mismatch between his ethics and those. And the question then is that, look, is it something cultural, or are there certain specific issues which caused it? But it's the ambiguity which is the biggest problem right now, and therefore it's very difficult to kind of comment in terms of what is it that is agitating, what agitated Mr. Atanu Chakraborty. Having said so, I think the bank has at least so far been on the a little bit on the front foot on this issue. That's the most credible path, because we know that if there is if there are certain uncertainty and governance uncertainty, it can erode trust by the market very quickly. So the fact that just as the market was opening, they were speaking to investors, giving them some degree of comfort that, what they said at that time is pretty much that they're as much in the dark about what the underlying issues are as the rest of the market is. But subsequently, I have seen some statements from the central bank that everything is okay. And in this case, if we kind of read between the lines, the fact that the Reserve Bank of India appointed Keki Mistry, who is for all intents and purposes an insider, means that they still have enough trust in the people, in the bank, and in the processes and systems. Otherwise, they could well have said that, look, there is, we want an outsider to kind of come in and step in at this moment where there is some degree of, there are some issues which have been raised, even though we are not sure what they are. So we're taking some comfort in that. We ourselves have been, looking at governance of companies very closely. And in all these years, we've kind of found that HDFC Bank has reasonably strong processes, and therefore it's not been something where there are red flags with regard to their governance. So we take comfort in our own analysis, we take comfort in some of the statements which have come, but nonetheless, there is some degree of ambiguity in the market, and it needs to be addressed in some form or the other. And the sooner it's done, the sooner that happens, the better off we all are.
All right, Amit, thanks so much for your comments. In fact, explaining the overall situation, how it's being seen overall. But Ashutosh Mishra, as Amit was mentioning, the bank as well as RBI both have been speedily really allaying fears around any differences or governance concerns coming to the board level. Does that really give a lot of sanity and also confidence in the bank? What's your view?
So yes, this gives a lot of sanity and confidence, especially when the regulator's letter came into the bank. So it really a lot of assurance comes from that front. But one thing is not very clear that what was the reason for his resignation. Yes, it looked like a power play, like you highlighted in the start of this event. So it can be a part of a power play between them. For time being, we don't see any major issue on the functioning of the bank because of this. But in the current market environment, when we have got this issues coming in and no specific reason, even in the con call came to they are not able to give the specific reason why he resigned. What was the key issue which he was facing up? So that may linger for some more period of time. But I don't see any major functional issue with the bank coming in. Yes, on governance, it will take some time. And I think that timeline will come from reappointment of the current managing director and new chairman coming into the place. These two things, even when that will be completed, by that time, things will be much more clearer.
So you did raise that all the concerns are not allayed, Ashutosh. I would like to point out that in his statement, Atanu Chakraborty has mentioned two important points. One was misalignment when it comes to the ethics and value, And then he later did speak to NDTV Profit and gave a quote that it was his personal values and ethics and nothing to do with the bank that he was referring to. So he allayed those concerns himself and demystified that particular aspect. But on the other hand, there's also a large merger process that is still on of HDFC Limited and HDFC Bank, with HDFC Bank as the listed entity. And that particular merger is also raised in the letter of Atanu Chakraborty, that probably it was not going in the way that he would have probably liked. Ashutosh, on this particular aspect, as an analyst of the bank and the merger process that you have tracked, you have views on the process of the merger and how it's been conducted?
So it's looked like that whatever they have put forward to the analysts, they are going ahead with that. They have said that FY26 will be the year of consolidation, which they are doing it. Now they are stating that FY27 will be the year of acceleration of the growth for the bank. We have seen the CD ratio from the upper level has been now bring down to a very reasonable level. So many of those things which they have guided is achieved. One thing which we need to know going forward, which was a very important point, was the PSL requirement. So that start kicking in, I think, from the next year onward. So that will be a very important thing from an investor point of view to look at how really they manage this PSL part of it, because the 4-year terms has extension has been given to them. So that will be the important things to watch out for the banks going forward here. Yes, on a merger, I don't see any major issues from the investor perspective. Yes, there were some initial issues which has been addressed earlier.
Right, Ashutosh. So on the merger process, you made a very pertinent point that after 4 years get completed, the PSL requirement that really kicks in as a bank, that is something that the bank will have to really take cognizance of. So that will be on top of our agenda to watch out for going forward. Amit Tandon, while we are talking about this particular development, now we also gathered from our sources that one point of conflict was also that the non-executive part-time chairman was trying to take a lot more strategic roles in terms of the executive role that the management has. And in fact, we do gather from our sources that he was indicated informally to avoid getting into the execution matters and taking calls on that. How do you differentiate the role of a board and the management in situations like this?
Look, you've touched upon something which is very important, which is, what is the role of the board and the chair, and what is the role of the executive management? Now, for a long time and for the longest, people have believed, look, it's the role of the board to define what the strategy is and so on and so forth. But if you think about it very carefully, it's the role of the management to decide what the strategy is and how will it be executed. It's for the board to first question and kick the tires on the strategy. Is this the right thing for the bank to do? Is this the right? So, if they say they want to focus on retail, not wholesale, just to give a big picture. So, is this the right thing to do? Should they be focusing on what are the underlying assumptions? Are they the correct assumptions? Is it consistent with their read of what the market is? And thereafter see how it is being executed. And finally, of course, look at what the parameters are on which the board is reporting. So there are completely different responsibilities. The responsibility of the chair is to see that, look, the meeting is conducted in the correct manner. Whatever are the issues which need to come to the board, come to the board. Whatever the time allocated to discuss each of the issues is adequate, and not get involved in the day-to-day running of the bank. And often, and we see that a lot with the market infrastructure institutions, some of the directors, and particularly those who are so-called public interest directors, have this view that, look, their role is very narrow, and the role is to ensure that whatever the regulator is saying is translated wholly and completely, irrespective of what the current situation in the underlying entity is, and that comes at the cost of everything else, and that's the only priority, rather than, and a very narrow definition of what needs to happen. So therefore, since there's a difference in the role, it is of course very difficult for people to decide, when is it that they're intervening too much, and when is it that they step back. But that is what defines a great chair and a great independent director from one who is less effective in their board role.
Right. So the differentiation of the management and the strategic role, Amit, as well as also what really is defined by the board and the chairman of the board, those two differentiations are very, very critical. Ashutosh Mishra, you know, on this particular point, there is one more aspect that had come to our notice while we were trying to understand the conflict areas. And you would remember how HDB and some of the subsidiaries transactions have really moved forward in the past at HDFC, right? And there was a time when MUFG, the Japanese company, was in advanced talks to buy out HDB. But it was decided against that and the IPO was done. We did gather that that was a point of contention where Atanu wanted it to be listed and his vision for and the strategic move really prevailed. How do you analyze a situation like this?
So that can be one of the reason out there. We don't know. We can only speculate whether that can be the reason or not. Yes, post performance of post IPO performance and no, even the off market pre-IPO price of the HDB and post-IPO performance is clearly indicating that some of the old shareholders has not made money. So there can be this can be one of the reasons which really started this whole issues. Yeah, that.
So all right. So that's an important word coming in. But to that point now, Amit, again coming to the strategic decisions and the direction that the company really needs to take. The board has some say, but it's a collective say. How much can a chairman take over in terms of dominating important matters?
That's entirely a question of personalities and who are there. You have chairmen who are very dominating and kind of push through decisions which they want. There are others who are much more consensus building and see that everyone is taking views are considered, and then you kind of arrive at a decision. But again, boards have to remember that it's the responsibility of the management to deliver on the numbers and meet the expectations which are of them rather than that of the board. And therefore the executive management also has to have a complete buy-in. Having a buy-in always helps, and since you've spoken, maybe that's one of the ways of reducing the friction between the various people. But look, at the end of the day, friction is not necessarily bad. We all assume that everyone who's on the board will kind of be, there'll be complete, complete alignment of views. But boards can and should be there should be some degree of discomfort by being in a board where different people have different points of view. They're very vocal about why they agree or why they don't agree with what is being said. Which is also par for course. But at the end of the day, they all need to be rowing in the same direction. They all need to say that, okay, this is the decision we've taken. I may disagree, but look, if that's the consensus, maybe in the collective wisdom of the board, I'm going to kind of agree and go along with what everyone has decided and move forward, rather than then kind of dig my heels in and say, over my dead body, this will not happen. I'm kind of quitting the board immediately because you're not doing what I'm saying. That's not mature, certainly not mature behavior. I'm not saying this is what has happened here. I'm talking about a general, about it much more generally.
The biggest takeaway from what you said, Amit, is that the board is supposed to function in a collective decision mode. It is not the chairman who has to really take control and dominate certain decisions. That's a very important corporate governance rules, and especially in a large bank, which is systemically so important for us. Ashutosh Mishra, we also gather that this particular conflict now going away with Atanu Chakraborty resigning and K.K. Mistry also lending his support to the decisions of the management and leadership of Shashidhar. Now, how do you see the way forward? Because we do understand from our sources that now the present CEO's position strengthens further with this conflict situation now ending, and going forward to be watched out for is his reappointment, which is due in October this year. How critical is his reappointment in this?
So it will be very critical to see his reappointment, and whether RBI give him a 3-year terms or whatever the board recommend. That will be another point which we need to watch out for. And who is going to be the next chairman of the bank? These two things or three things will be very important to watch out for. But yes, it's also create whatever things was there going at leadership or board level, if that get addressed and bank is moving into the accelerated growth mode in FY27 onward, if everything remains good in the economic part of it. We are in between some war and other parts, so that have its own risk in the whole scenario. Then probably investor will get over this in the next 3 to 4 month period. But at least for next 3 to 4 month period, there will be some little bit of some discomfort till the time these 2-3 events get unfolded. Reappointment of the current MD and appointment of the new chairman. That will be very important things to watch out for.
All right. So, Ashutosh, two important takeaways coming in apart from the PSL requirement watch and the merger process being completed. It's going to be very critical for this particular year that who comes after the interim chairmanship of K.K. Mistry really gets over, and it's short-term in nature. So, who comes at the helm of the board of HDFC Bank? And the second most important thing is the reappointment of the present CEO and for the next term, and that is due in October this year. Let's also hear out another expert, Abhizar Devanji, on this particular matter.
So on boards, very frankly, differences of opinion and healthy debate is a very good thing. And frankly, if that has happened, that actually proves the governance of the organizations. Having known HDFC for quite a while, I do think that from a governance, from a debate, for an openness of discussion perspective, that organization has the right culture to do it, and it does do it. Now, ideally, what happens is sometimes as part of this discussion is that, some people may agree with a few things, others may find it ideologically different to do what they want to do. The regulator will want to get into what are the issues. And if the issues are simply interpersonal, then I don't think the regulator is bothered. Now, if you look at it from a regulator's point of view, HDFC has had some operating issues which they have sorted out with smaller fines. They have a larger issue in terms of integrating well the bank and the housing finance company. And that process, frankly, is mammoth. And you've got to give it to management that they have done a fantastic job at a time when times are turbulent.
All right. There goes Abhizar Devanji's, statement and also comments coming in. Amit Tandon, while agreeing to disagree at times is only healthy in a corporate environment, in this particular situation, this particular company with almost 45 to 49% of foreign investor shareholding in a bank, and that is a huge amount, and the corporate governance standards are much higher, or at least the expectation is much higher in higher FII held companies. How do you see this really building a perception or impacting HDFC Bank's premiumization on the stock market from the FII and also some premium investor community?
Look, again, what you're asking is saying is very relevant because unresolved ambiguity lingers, and governance uncertainty can erode trusts in ways that financial metrics will find very hard to repair. What the bank needs to do is kind of stay ahead of this, any regulatory inquiry that may be there. And maybe they could facilitate a structured dialogue between Mr. Chakraborty and an independent agency to surface and examine what his concerns are and address them and be a little bit more vocal about what is happening. I will, of course, having said that, say one thing, that we do take comfort in the fact that when you kind of take a step back and think about RBI as a regulator, they again don't mince words. So, there were issues with the bank on their credit cards, and they kind of said that, okay, you can't onboard new customers for about a 6-month or an 8-month or a longer period of time. Before that, there were certain other issues which they had flagged and said that, look, we're not going to sign off on the approval of an executive director till the issues are resolved. So the Reserve Bank of India has been on the front foot, and at the moment, there's nothing which has kind of surfaced. So all we have to hope is that it's unfortunate, in terms of the letter, just said that there are certain issues. It would have been good if, Mr. Chakraborty had voiced what they were. Is it something to do with culture and ethics? But he's been in the bank for 4.5, 5 years. So therefore, it's something which should have been flagged from his side earlier. Is it just the fact that the company is mis-selling, which is, again, something which, if you voice it and discuss it, which can be addressed at the management level? Is it some third concern? So at this moment, we're kind of all in the dark, and that is again something which was came out in the conference this morning, which the bank had held, where they said that, look, we ourselves are really not clear. So I will kind of encourage the bank and Mr. Chakraborty to kind of facilitate a dialogue between themselves, so that there's clarity, and the sooner you're kind of able to get a sense of what has happened, you're able to kind of communicate that to the market and the regulators, you will be able to move on and get this behind you.
All right. So very pertinent points there made by you, Amit Tandon. Thank you so much for all your expert take on the governance aspects and what's the way forward. Ashutosh Mishra, on your keen sense on the strategic as well as analytical way forward for this particular bank from here on. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us.